Hi, welcome to Jade Kind Gaming. My name is Adam. Today, I am going to be beginning the process of actually building a world and inviting you along. Beginning. Talking you through the beginning year and a half of not working on it that I've done so far. I decided a while back, about a year and a half ago, that I wanted to work on a world that I would use time and again for multiple. I love world building. It's one of my favorite things about being a game master. But I generally build a new world for every game I run. It's just kind of what I've always done. Or sometimes the gimmick for a game is that I'm returning to one that my players liked in the past. But I've thought, for a while now, it'd be interesting to build a world and then continue to work on it. You look at the worlds that became what we know as like the Forgotten Realms and realize they were just continually worked on. I was like, it'd be fun to try and do that. So I decided about a year and a half ago, that's what I'd do. And I decided the first step would be to get some input from my players on what that should entail. And I haven't done that. And it's been a year and a half of me not working on it. And over all this time of me not working on it, I basically have like a 10-page document of all of the notes on the world so far that I've come up with. Now, none of it's set in stone. It's all just ideas. And that's a big part of the way that world building works. I mean, I've done my world building videos, series, whatever, and that's not dead. I know it's been a long time since I've had a new entry in it. It's not dead. Perhaps even as I work on this, it'll help inspire me with another subject to do in that video. But world building isn't something that you sit down, intent to do, and it happens. Sometimes that can occur. But I have notes. These are just some of the ones I happen to keep, whether it's scrap pieces of paper from work or just whatever bits of lined paper around from wherever I happen to be, or little notes that are in the margins of my church's bulletin that I'm not sure if I wrote this in the middle of service when an idea hit me or if it was something I wrote after church, but that was a note on a Sunday. Because it's just ideas strike you, and either you have to decide that's not so great an idea and ignore it, or you write it down so you can keep it. And I've done that for a year and a half with the idea of eventually wanting to start on this. And the reason I'm now recording this is that tomorrow and next day, sometime pretty soon, I've talked to my friends and we're actually going to sit down and we're going to record getting their ideas on what the world should entail. And after that, I'll start more with the idea at some point of actually working on it. And I'll, of course, invite you along that journey. Sometimes it may be something where we sit down and we actually start working on it and I try and arrange things with you. Other times it'll be things like this where I catch you up on the notes that I have so far. And like I said, I have 10 pages. And the idea is I'm going to kind of go through the notes. I'll read through them. And some of them I might pause and give you my ideas and what's going on in my head, either about them or that inspired them, if I can remember it, as it does go back more than a year. But I figure, for one, we'll start by actually pulling that up so you can watch it as well. And I will also note, this is going to be a long video, because there's a lot of notes in here. But, yeah, just sort of going on my head, and hopefully seeing the process of building a world might help, because it's not an easy sit down and just start working on it kind of thing. It is a process that happens whether you're sitting at work, sitting at home, or parents, wherever, sitting in church. Wherever your brain is going, ideas come. And you filter through and you think about it. Because it is a hobby that just sort of encompasses whatever else you're working on. Something else happens. You hear a song You hear a song, you're like, it's a good song. I got an idea. Whatever it may be. But yeah, so we'll go through the notes here. A general medieval fantasy setting, an Earth analog with areas, continents that are more influenced by some other cultures, perhaps mixed up in interesting ways. For example, maybe the Egyptian equivalent is in an Arctic environment instead of a desert. And the changes to the culture that difference makes could develop interests. So the idea is to pull from Earth, make some ideas. But when I'm pulling things that are more direct, like this is related to this specific culture, like to try and mix something up about it and think about how that would change things. And here I have one of the ideas that I love seeing how early, because the notes literally are typed as I came up with them. Top of the document is the oldest, going down the document to newer stuff. This is one of two of the core ideas when I think about the world. Set things up so within the setting there is an additional mechanical benefit choice made at character creation. Perhaps a one-time benefit, perhaps something that gives you a bonus, a few key points during the campaign, maybe 1st, 6th, 12th levels, something like that. A heroic catalyst. What about you has made you capable of being a hero, of gaining levels and advancing as you do compared to everyone else? Perhaps an option for a style of play that is a bit higher power, but can still begin at level 1. So this is basically the idea of let's add a option on top of, your race, your class, your background, your heroic catalyst. And I'm thinking I'm probably going to go with something that has a few different options at this point, not just a first level thing. But yeah, the idea of you're able to be the main character because something is special about you. Have deities and tiers. I write the note like vampires in Vampire the Masquerade, which I don't really know if that's how they are, but it's how I think of them, how they are, because it's how my friend Ryan has utilized them in the past. So that was an idea to me, basically to describe that, with the top being original deity, who watches over the cosmos and has no interaction with the world itself, but can have any domain. So you can just be a cleric with any domain you want and worship whatever this cosmic entity that began it all. And basically you can have a cleric that doesn't have to necessarily be too involved. If you want the cleric powers and you don't want to have to worry about it, you have an option for that. If you're not wanting to have that deity relationship, you have an option for that. He created 3 below him. I say here aligning magic, martial, and sneak, which I say be more creative with the names. My brain says, well, that's Skyrim. That's Skyrim's 3 tiers, and I don't know if I'll stick with those, or I might mess with them. But the idea is, I like the idea of splitting it into 3. And they look over the world in a very broad sense, but do not directly interact with the lives of mortals. So they're at least planet-centric, and they're divided up, and you have that. And then they have each created some number of deities below them, who live in the outer planes, or whatever the equivalent in my world ends up being, and can be directly reached by mortals. You have a physical method of getting to them. Now we're getting to a lot of the deities in a lot of D&D worlds. You're going to Elysium to visit Pelor in his temple. It's like, that's higher level going to there, but I mean, it's an option. They're reachable. They're less overall power, but more direct influence, and the lowest level to be truly worshipped, and the lowest level to grant domains and power. So maybe, I don't know, I wrote it could have any domain at the top, but here I'm saying that you have to choose one of these to get a domain and get power from them. Maybe. I don't know. None of this is in stone. These are just floating ideas. And Just kind of an idea. Each of them have one or more children who are more of like higher saints. Some people worship them, but doing so is truly worshiping the deity above them, a step as far as the power that you're getting, and they are freely able to travel between the outer and material plane, as well as to procreate with mortals. So they're more of a next level down. They're going to have a more specific, whereas you might have one of the deities over love, then you're going to end up with the ones below them of young love, of lust, of familial, family love. Just the different options. Like you can divide it further. But they are able to procreate with mortals or somehow have children. Because below them are what I'm currently calling Godborn, or something like that. A group that are mortal children of the deities above them. And being one of these is one of the heroic catalyst options. The idea that you can have your heroic catalyst literally be that you are descended from the gods. I like that idea. Another heroic catalyst option could be Star Blessed, which is based on astrological signs, giving a reason to add astrology to the world. And this could just allow benefits of some stat increases. The idea that you get a +2 to a stat here, +1 here, +1 here, +2 there. Something, whatever. However it ends up balancing out, it is just purely a few stat bonuses as you go, and it is a quick and easy option for someone that doesn't care, doesn't want to mess with it. It's just, okay, fine, you don't want to mess with this extra layer of flavor, just choose what sign you were born under and you get some stat bonuses. Everyone loves that. There you go. Be happy. Move on. Another option, Prophesied, could be someone over whom prophecy was spoken, and so I can have some options for that. Wealthy, giving you money at the start, possibly a larger stipend later, and an inheritance that could even include property later, which my friends, of course, made fun of. So your capability of being a hero could be a descendant from the gods, born under a specific sign or a prophecy, or you got money. But I mean, also it's an option for someone that does just want to be able to have money and eventually know they'll get land, and yeah, it's like, why not? Soul Sold could be someone who sold their immortal soul to a darker power in order to get power in the mortal realm. Someone that did not have a heroic catalyst, but who would turn to dark means in order to get it. The things one may do for power, which of course ties in perfectly with if you're playing a warlock, but also just sort of influencing that to other points. Just a few ideas. I may have more further down, but I'm starting to come up with ideas for I want to have this extra layer that ties the world into the game system. I like that. All right. Then we move on, and I have little breaks. How do I? There we go. Still getting used to recording with this here. So yeah, I have little breaks on the screen, and they're generally between different types of notes, or notes of different time periods, or whatever it may be. And I just kind of do that to organize my notes. Mentally, it helps me to find where things were. But then we get into planes. The material plane. This is the prime plane where the setting is focused. Yeah, that's how D&D uses it, so we're starting there. The astral plane. The plane of dreams and imagination. This endless silvery sea is used primarily to travel to other planes by finding portals between them. Technically, it is through this plane that access to other material planes and beyond that to their inner and outer planes could be achieved. So that is talking in a grand scheme of if you want a world-hopping game and I want to utilize this world as part of it. But also just laying down the basic assumptions for some planes that are from the normal D&D cosmos. Particularly astral and ethereal, which spells use. I'm like, let's just keep them. Let's not redefine things that the magic, it's like the more things we redefine, the more we have to do as far as magic. Ethereal plane. This fog-covered plane borders the material and elemental planes, allowing for a quick getaway to those who know how to access it. So we have those options. Then the 4 elemental planes, each of the 4 elements, air, earth, fire, and water, has a plane that mirrors the material plane, in that a major city constructed on the material plane would lead to one in each of the elemental planes, and so on. I think, at least the way I read it, the Shadowfell and the Feywild were sort of described like that, where they're these mirrors of the material, and I'm basically dropping those. But I was like, I liked the idea of that mirrored plane, where you could travel, like if you did like a planar transport, like from material to the elemental, you could be in the same spot, and it would just be what the world is like with the, if only but the world were all aflame. So that's kind of the interest with that. And like the water plane could be completely underwater, and it's like, what if the world were at the bottom of the sea? Just sort of ideas for that. Heavens, upper outer planes. So idea for that, and having a few ideas: throne room or kingdom, paradise, holy place, for just different options for heavens. Coming up with my own list, and they'll be described and defined eventually. But just some rough ideas. I think those are probably biblically based, biblically pulled from the Bible. Then I have Underworld, a middle outer plane, and this one functions as the elemental planes do, which is almost the idea of giving it your upper outer planes are literally above, your mid outer plane actually aligns with the material plane, so your hells are, the lower outer planes are literally below. So that's why the mid outer plane functions like the elemental planes. It is actually, again, laid over the material plane as a mirror to it. And in general, a destination for the dead. Inhabited by them in the form of spectral undead, the devoted or soul-souled are instead brought to one of the heavens or hells after death, potentially transformed in other ways, or maintaining their mortal-like bodies, depending on who and what they were, what they went elsewhere. But basically the idea of, there are reasons why you, when you die, might go to the heavens, but just non-devout, normal, lived their life would just kind of wander and fade into the underworld, would fade into this other plane. Sort of a graveyard and land of the dead, or sea of the dead, you sort of feel to it, with ghosts and probably zombies and skeletons and just all that. Just sort of tying all that and having a world of the dead as a mirror to the material plane. And then the hells, which are the lower outer planes. Outer darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth, is the plane from which aberrations are born. That is definitely biblically pulled, and then just tying the aberrations into those. An endless void of eldritch horror. So, taking that. Lake of fire, prison, outer darkness, all, again, biblical terms. So those are just my starting points for some of the hells, as I had for some of the heavens. I'll expand more later, but just some initial ideas, because, you want a grouping of different hells and different heavens. Yeah, keep it interesting. We get another break, and we get to races. I have tieflings from each of the hells. Perhaps the core tieflings are from, the Lake of Fire, but there would be an eldritch horror one from the Outer Darkness, and re-include the race to split into sub-races. So I would, type it up, take tieflings as they are in the player's handbook, and I'd break parts of it off, and I'd put that into a sub-race that would be for one option, and other parts would be part of the core race. Hill dwarves are also known as half-dwarves. A mix of dwarf and human. True dwarves, stone, iron, ruby, etc., are earth elemental-like race formed from earthen materials, which is just the idea of how do I take that classic and traditional dwarf archetype and how do I make it cool, different, but still founded. So hill dwarves, which basically using the stats for hill dwarves, and they're half dwarves, and whether or not they're like actually genetically half or just they're a humanoid like dwarf, is irrelevant. But basically having where there is a dwarf that is what we're familiar with, but that more dwarves are literally made from the materials of the earth. And I'll get into that. I know I get into that more later. Perhaps have elves, and maybe they're along the line of the Godborn, like maybe all elves are Godborn or something. I don't know. Perhaps not elves. I'm not even sure of that yet. And I just write, yes, there are humans. So as far as some races, those are some general ideas at this point. I'm not going to assume that all the races in the Player's Handbook are going to make it. Unless I have a player that really wants them. Dragonborn probably won't. Then just some general notes. I want at least one large city, detailed and expansive enough to support a campaign within the city alone. I want to do a mega city. I want to do incredible detail. That's part of the reason that this idea of building a setting that I use over and over again is exciting to me, is because I can take a game and just focus on building a city in this world, and I already have, at that point I'd already have some things for the rest of the world developed as far as the way things are talked about beyond the city's limits, but just being able to put time into building just a city would be cool. I want a region with many islands, like an archipelago, I think it's pronounced. Each with cities or villages which are traveled between by boat or ship. That's just an interesting visual. I can visualize it in my mind, and I like that idea for the cultures that are based around that. Some culture differentiation. I can have surnames with some cultures, but one may take on the name of the father, son or daughter of father, and then of their spouse once married. Another could use professionist surnames. So players could suggest, adventurer, outcast, wanderer, where your surname literally becomes, the outcast or something. So just ideas other than just having traditional, this is a name because it's passed on, it was your parents' last name and their parents' last name, and we just keep it going. It's like, what are some other things? Part of me does that because I want to get into the details of surnames, because half of my players, don't always bother to come up with surnames. So, I want area of the map that has been desecrated. Okay, so I write this note. Area of the map that has been desecrated, centered on some coastal village, leaving not only the town and its graveyard haunted, but the sea near that and the forest on the other end as well. Not completely devoid of life. Some hermits have taken refuge in the area, knowing few will come calling. Perhaps a coven of hags. And then I write, no. That goes in the Underworld. Because my original mindset, I'd forgotten about my Underworld idea. I'm coming up with this over the period of a year and a half as I slowly build up these notes. And just being like, yeah, I want this idea, with haunted seas and haunted woods. But I'm like, no. That goes in the Underworld. I have a whole plane for that. We're good. And then I say just here, could a planet race work? Trents? At the saint level of deity, I'd mentioned before that, that sort of one that's between the normal level of deity and where the Godborn can be. But at the saint level of deity, under love, have young love. I use that as my example because it's in my head. Like a Cupid type deity who creates passionate, perhaps fleeting desire for romance. Yeah. Just sort of ideas for deities, which we'll continue to see throughout the notes. have a set number, maybe 7 to 12, of great sea beasts, named creatures of different types that traverse the open seas. So you have, your Kraken, your Leviathan, more of them. Basically, have a set number of them. Then explain that in the elemental plane of water, there may be more of the same type of being, unnamed numbers. So the idea is there's these select number of these great sea monsters. And, they would each have their own name because they're unique and devastating. But if you go to the plane of water, that's just one of a species. I have an idea, perhaps circle casting or something detailed. A way for a few mages to gather, and so long as they all know the spell and have the components, have the ability to make a spell permanent with a short period of time that may usually take a year of work. The idea that I want permanent magic definitely enters into my mindset as I've been building this or coming up with these ideas. I don't want a player to have to spend a year somewhere to make their own permanent teleportation circle. No, I don't want that. I want there to be a faster way, and however that ends up achieved may vary, but I want that. I want them to be able to make that. Likewise, blanket that there are spells for each magic item to enchant them, can learn the spell, level dependent on rarity, and expend material components to enchant an item with the spell. This may or may not be tie into the circle casting since it is making a permanent enchantment, but just the idea. You should be able to make your magic items. Then I have here a city that uses lightning rails. A set number of points throughout the massive city where every few minutes they can stand on a platform, be turned into electricity, teleport to a certain point across the city for faster transportation. However, is traveling along a sparking wire that stretches over the city, and there's some risk of an issue. If machinery messes up, might end up at the wrong station. If sabotage happens, may end up booted out along the wire, taking massive damage, dealing damage to the person who obstructed the line to stop you. And that is, again, like a visual image of people going to like a station, grabbing hold of something, being turned into and then you have like these sparking wires going through the city as people are traveling through them as electricity. Just different form of teleportation that allows for adventure potential. Who knows? Just some thoughts. I have a city with dueling grounds as the town center. A lowered pit with seating where people gather, and vendors sell snacks, portable meals. Just sort of idea for, you've seen that, whether gladiator kind of thing. Like, let's make that part of the society. A city with an all-out night market. Probably some YouTube videos I've watched of people in other countries with night markets and getting food and vendor stalls and all that. It's interesting to me. Here's some Underworld ideas. Corpses, remains laid to rest on the plane, rise as corporeal undead, zombies, etc. So the idea is you could actually be buried there, and then you end up as like a corpse, like a zombie. And those who die without pledging their spirits that they may go elsewhere end up here as incorporeal undead, or maybe some deity is based from here. Like, maybe it's because you have this deity you go there. Who knows? There are living people that live here. Communities that, for one reason or another, some sought freedom, as a ruling class is not as structured. Some sought to reconnect with lost loved ones, say sharing a home with the ghost of your deceased wife kind of thing. Like, so unwilling to let go that you travel to the land of the dead to live the rest of your life there. And then I use the term Ghostwell is a place where the planes grow thin and incorporeal undead can travel from this plane to the material. Not necessarily a literal well, could be, but not necessarily. But the idea of, yeah, there are ways that you'll end up with, undead and spirits and such in the material plane as well. Have a deity of sanctuary or something. Selfish, safety in dangerous places, freedom, who has a home in the hell of prison, a section separated by an impenetrable wall to keep them free. Irony, they are locked behind the wall to maintain freedom. That is blatantly, I heard Hades Town. And that is where my brain went from that, Why do we build the wall? My children, my children. So that goes into a music-inspired idea. And whether I use it or not, who knows? But that's just, again, irony is nice. We're free here, as we're trapped behind our wall. A deity housed in a room, tent, in a temple, in a holy city, something with light. Shines out of the tent and can be seen at night. A city built around a deity and mostly worshippers in that city. Goal is to be united with the deity, soul merged with its own, but based on being good enough. Otherwise, end up elsewhere, the Underworld maybe. Must do enough good to outweigh your bad. Basically common misconceptions through Christianity, not able to understand the grace of God, leads people to really think that's how things are. And I was like, that's an interesting concept. People come up with it on their own. So maybe I should do something with it. That'd be fun to, as I'm creating this wide pantheon, why not? Have a nature deity, or maybe more than one, under the physical tree. Again, going back to the idea of those three upper deities that I'm not super set on, but at this point, we're saying this. But at least one. And souls dedicated to it come back as Trent or similar. So all or some Trents and such have a past as someone else. But they just continue on the material plane. The idea that where your soul would go from this nature deity is into a tree folk, a tree being, and you'd live on as that. So again, going to the idea of let's have a species of plant people, only now it's like, well, maybe you used to be something else. Some cool visual things. So these are probably ideas from looking at nature footage or something like that. Cool ideas. Be an area that has a brief time of year where the trees break out into orange and blue blossoms, similar to Japan's cherry blossom trees. So, that white kind of, snow of petals, but I like orange and blue as a variant. It would still be interesting, definitely very different. So, thought of that. Black sand beaches are an actual thing, are super cool to see pictures of. So I just wrote that word in, that would be cool, visually. Perhaps differentiate. I like this idea. Perhaps differentiate between ancient enchanted items and modern made items. One of a few ingredients goes into every item, perhaps different per school of magic. Therefore, someone with arcane knowledge could identify the item at a glance, at least to know the school. Perhaps they even give off a faint glow. Ancient magic items do not follow the same rules, but the method to make them is lost to time. Doing this also encourages having a system for modern items and a market for them. The idea being that there are older magic items where you might look at it and not know it's a magic item, unless you're detecting magic or something. But I want magic items to be more common, at least in some areas. And so the idea of having them be something that can be made, but because you're making it with the modern process, it's going to have its specific visual appearance, it's going to be identifiable. So there are advantages why there would still be outrageous prices for some of the more ancient ones that might do the same thing as a modern magic item would do, but because of the difference, you could tell the difference, and it would have at least a slight property difference. You know, if it's more stealthy, it's more discreet. So that's kind of an idea with that, at least. And then I say have a permanency spell school, allowing quicker options for permanent magic to make the cost of components the bigger concern, make prices such as that most common family have access to 1 or 2 magic items that are permanent cantrips. Now, I don't know if I'm going to actually do a spell school for it, but I want more permanent magic. I write right there. I want commoners, your base level CR0 commoners, to have 1 or 2 cantrip items. And some of those are much more simple things that are utilizing prestidigitation for chill, so they have a box that they can use, like a basic mini refrigerator or something like that. Like they can be very basic things, but most families would have a couple of these very basic things. Just as far as where things are, but somehow, again, whether it's a special school of magic or just a few extra spells that add to the list that allow it to happen, I don't know, but I want that as an option. Building on the same concept, perhaps have 3 components to magic items. The physical item, which must be made. You have to construct that. The component that is based on the school of magic, which is somehow mined, and a workaday job people could have. I need this special material, and that's a commoner job to go out and mine for that, or whatever. And the component that is gathered from, for example, a monster. The rarity of the item determines how much of the component is needed, and the CR of the monster determines how much can be gathered from it. The type or capabilities of the creature determine what it can be used to create. For example, would need something from a flying creature to make boots of flying. That little paragraph entails having to come up with charts and several pages of notes on how this actually functions. But the idea is you should be able to, 1, whatever, there's already rules for just crafting just an item. 2, you can either go do normal job work to get, or hire just commoners to get and pay for the arcane component, material, mineral. But there's also an adventure component. And of course, I'm sure there's a way to pay for it as well, but almost the idea of where you would have to go gather components from creatures. Nick likes that idea. I think. That's why I put it in there. I hope it's what he likes. I get that impression. I long have. But the idea of killing monsters to get bits from them. If need, an excuse for dungeons, which of course you need an excuse for why there's dungeons. Perhaps a mage plague in a prior age of the world. When magic was more secretive, mages had to go into hiding to avoid being destroyed. Build temples to lock themselves away in, made themselves liches, or intelligent items. I say liches if I have access to that, because I often try and build things, at least that I write down based on the system reference document, with the theory of I might eventually publish this. Whether I do or not, who knows, but it is something that always goes into my mind. But yeah, just sort of the idea of mages going away and doing that, and that's why you have some of the dungeons full of magic items. Perhaps there are 3 continents, at least 3 main ones, and I might have more, but one of which is a higher magitech development, one that is being colonized, like currently in that process, with the drama that comes with that, and one near unexplored. Divide the races amongst some of the separate from the others. So there might be some races that are only on one continent, not on the others, kind of thing. But that idea being that you have this more magitech and civilized nations and such one that is like the new world of America, and one that is, you're going on jungle treks through Africa kind of thing, like completely unexplored. So different types of adventures able to be ran in the world. Advanced cities use arcane batteries for power. Spellcasters with the proper cantrips, you have to spend a thing to get the cantrip, can go sell spell slots into the batteries, payment based on spell level, as well as how low the power is. Have a general assumption for power in a city. And only the story would alter the payout. In other words, as far as how much you're making from doing it, basically you have the idea of here's what you can make, but the story might mean, oh, the city is low on power and you can give up your spell slots to make more money because of it, or things like that. The cantrip to charge the batteries is, if I do this permanency school, it would be in the new magic school. If not, I can find something to put it in. I don't know. There was a while where I was like, I want to make a new school of magic, and now I'm like, that's a lot. I'm not sure how much anything is missing from what we have. It might just all work to put it into the existing schools. But when I was writing this, I was really like, it'll be fun to make a whole new one. Who knows? And it's on arcane casters lists. So, as far as who gets that. Casting time of 1 bonus action, range of touch, component somatic, duration instantaneous. In addition to being able to use to charge the arcane batteries, which might be part of some magic items, you could have magic items that are modern made that have batteries. You have to charge them back up with this, or go, charge them up at a city by paying to get more. But you have this battery power to determine the number of uses. It can be pumped directly into a creature to cause damage, must expend a spell slot while casting it, and it does like 1d20 force damage per spell level of the slot expended. If you hit with a melee spell attack, no damage on a miss. Immediately following this action, the target may use its reaction to make 1 melee attack against you. That idea of because you're casting a cantrip, but it's using at least a first level spell slot. Right there, I have d20. I don't know, maybe, but that's a big variety. That's Diablo's electric damage of between 1 and high number, and then they get to, if they have their action, they get to fight back because it's designed for charging a battery. You can put that charge into a person if you want, but the way that your actions are using it gives them opportunities. Again, just ideas. Another idea. A society, probably on the continent that is in the process of being civilized, that has the death penalty for murder. Now, of course, many of them are going to have that, but that has the death penalty for murder and a high cause of death rate being for murder and the death penalty. It's not considered taboo. The mindset is, don't be so much of a jerk to someone that they die to rid the world of you. When older, it's normal for someone to go out and kill someone with whom they've had a grievance with. Let themselves be taken in, being guilty, and ready to be put to death. It also supports the respect your elders viewpoint, gives a motivation for adventure. Children of dead jerks leave town to avoid being targeted by someone who still wants revenge. But just that idea of a society that, and I say this like on this continent that's being civilized, almost maybe was more savage, barbarian group, but now civilization is coming in and they're advancing towards that. Their society is growing towards that more modern, but they get the idea of, well, death penalty, yes, the society itself should decide if you kill someone, you die. Yes, we shouldn't be killing people unless we're ready to die for it. Not the, okay, so don't kill anyone. It's, okay, yes, that seems like a fair trade. It's just a different mindset, and that would make for an interesting society. have have an overall book of scriptures compiled by a good or neutral deity. This would be the widespread available method for obtaining scriptures for any deity. Though some groups claim more scriptures than are included in the book, so some groups are going to say, oh no, that's only part of our holy texts. But, they have what they have. And it is from this church, whatever the good or neutral deity that is compiling this, that introductions are, and often titles, are given. So this would be the reason why some deities might have titles like the Fallen or the Wicked, even though their own followers might disagree with that being a fair title for the deity. The deity that does this book, whatever church makes this book, is pro-knowledge. So they would likely include the church-given titles in the introduction as well. They're going to give commentary, but they're also going to present what the other church is saying, which to me is the mindset of making it where people have access to the scriptures of all the different churches and such. And for me, it just sounds like a fun way to write some prose at some point as needed. Came up with the idea I could delve into the Bible and get inspiration because, you get your letters, all the letters from, whatever, Paul to the Corinthians, and, the way those are worded. You also get your Gospels that are, here is this story, and you get it from multiple perspectives. Then you get your Psalms, which is a collection of songs. You get your Proverbs, which is the wisdom. You get Song of Solomon, which is a weird poem about sex. I mean, you get some interesting things. You get your account of names. What deity accounts for the lineage and lists everyone's name? Who begot who? Who begot... Just, I'm like... That says so much about a church. Like, who is it's probably this pro-knowledge, record-keeping church probably is the one where their gospel is, listing the lineages for whatever they are. Or maybe the god of nobility is listing the line of kings. Who knows? But just the thought of that is interesting to me for that. And also it means, I can make some bits and segments of it for the different churches. I can come up with introductions, and it also gives me reasons, like I say in there. If I want to have a deity be the Fallen, I don't think their own followers are going to be following the Fallen, but other people might say they are. So, just interesting project, interesting thing, and prose. It's an opportunity to write prose as part of the world building, which I like. Especially when it's stuff that would be distributed within the world and could therefore be quoted by people in the world. People would know it. If your character is a cleric, they would probably at least know sections of their own deity's scriptures, and some of them I can make sure have some cool things to pull out of there. Battle chants for the paladin or whatever, for just interesting options. Then jumping off of that, I get into airships. Perhaps have a set number of airships in the world. Maybe 12. Perhaps less, as some have been crashed or destroyed. A noble inventor who made them died, and his possessions, home, were auctioned off. His home may be bought at auction or found abandoned, depending on how long since the death. So, I can literally have it where... Because part of my idea with the large city is I want there to be the option that players could buy homes, and I'll have a number of options for that, where they can have a home base there. So perhaps this is one of those. They can either, if this noble just recently died, they could actually go to the auction and buy things such as his home, or maybe one of these airships. Or maybe no one bought it and is sat abandoned and stripped, and they can get it that way. Yeah, I can have a few different options. This is all loose notes at this point, just coming up with ideas. And this could be a player bought mansion option in the major city. Okay, so I got ahead of myself. Perhaps eventually someone deciphers old notes or reverse engineers an existing ship and they become more readily available. But perhaps that is at the end of the current age that the game is set within. I mentioned at the beginning that there are two main things that I think of when I think of the setting that I've built so far. One of them is the heroic catalyst. I haven't gotten to the second one, which might tie more into whatever the current age is than this. We'll get there. But that was just an idea. Maybe the idea is the next stage, airships are more common. Could be. Maybe more common airships help usher the end of this age, and so they are really both true. And a reason for airships is much of the unexplored world does not have teleportation circles, so they are good for exploring uncharted lands. Good for exploring uncharted lands. Maybe they're not magic based. Maybe the airships are not based on using magic, in which case they can go into areas where magic doesn't work. Why might that be? We'll get there. But yeah, just think of the ideas of, I'd like that. I like the idea of airships, but I don't want it to be something that's widespread. I like the visual. I mean, it's a cool steampunk visualization, but I don't want that to be so much so that that is the image that represents the campaign. It is a rare and awesome thing that you can see, not something that you see regularly. Here I go into Heroic Catalyst a little bit more. I mentioned there'd be more details on it. Perhaps what sets apart normal people from those with a Heroic Catalyst would be hit point potential. As in, normal folks could never get their hit points to keep going up, which allows deadly consequences for things like failed teleportation or magitech mishaps, but doesn't risk them actually being deadly to players after they have a few levels. The idea being, let's say I have the lightning rail, and someone tampers with it, and everyone falls out of the lightning, and everyone takes, 3d10 damage. And most of the civilians that the players were in the lightning rail are dead. But the players are level 8, and they're all fine. Regardless of whatever damage was rolled, they're fine. Because they have more hit points. The commoner folk, they don't have a heroic catalyst. They weren't able to keep developing hit points. Their hit points are all still at 8. 3d10 killed most of them, unless they got really lucky rolls. Just an idea. Sometimes when I read my own writing, I'm like, that was an interesting way to write that, Adam. I write here, on the topic of dwarves, which we weren't, but I guess we are now. And I mentioned there'd be more info on the dwarves, I think. Dwarves are as vast and numerous as the stones and minerals that the planet is made of. Most dwarven societies or cities are primarily a single and unique type of dwarf, though a few have spread out and are more common in the world above ground. Being most dwarven societies are one type of dwarf, these are all ruby dwarves. And unique, you're generally not going to find ruby dwarves anywhere else in the world. That's kind of the idea of what I mean by, single and unique. Half-dwarves, sometimes called hill dwarves, are most common outside of dwarven society. Of the true dwarves, perhaps iron, ruby, and marble dwarves are the most widespread. On main continent here. Main continent being that first one with the magitech with higher societies. And I say iron, ruby, and marble as options, but really what I mean is one metal, one gemstone, one rock. I want to have 3 of the other kinds of dwarves that are more likely to have spread than some others. Basically, here are the main ones I'm going to create. Other dwarves might show up as I develop societies for them, but I'm going to start with these 3 kind of thing. Some may have alternate choices for weapon training or tool proficiencies. Gemstone dwarves might get innate spells with Constitution as their casting stat. Perhaps Firebolt for ruby dwarves. Could be. Perhaps there are dwarves out of some of the materials needed for enchanting. Not saying that stuff is mined. if they are mineral-based requirements. So if they are mined, then maybe there are dwarves made out of that. Perhaps gemstone dwarves each have a cantrip and a bonus for that cantrip, such as ruby dwarves having the option to do d12 instead of d10 on firebolts damage, or maybe they could choose to make it psychic damage. Or perhaps diamond dwarves get dancing lights and can increase the brightness or distance by centering it on, or rather in themselves. Or maybe not. Maybe they can just get an expanding spell list like Drow do. I don't know. It's just coming up with ideas and options, trying to think of, spitballing ideas here. I want to make it interesting. I do like the idea that some group of dwarves have some magic. Half-dwarves have the big fancy beard thing, which you think of when you think of dwarves. But this comes from true dwarves' culture of body expression. Many dwarves, they don't have true hair. It's literally made, the guy is literally made out of iron. He doesn't grow hair. That is not a thing that he is growing. But some carve appearances of fancy hair. So perhaps he has no real hair, but he's, worked himself to look like he has a fancy beard and a mohawk. It's all made out of iron still. But it's decorative. For body modification is common for dwarves. They carve and chisel themselves. The idea that is part of what spreads across dwarven society is that expression amongst your body. You are the materials that you work. So you work your own materials to express yourself the way you want to. I thought that was just a cool way to help, again, make dwarves awesome. There should be celebrities in the big city. Perhaps elsewhere. Often bards, but people who are known for their writing, their singing, their acting, and have a celebrity status. Who have paintings of themselves commissioned and are sold to other people, and who are recognized on the streets. Come up with actual celebrities. I mean, it's just something I've not done in any of the worlds I've built. Sometimes a player might get to that status, and again, that'd be awesome. By having this, you can have a player that's what they work towards, and they manage to get that celebrity status. But yeah, just the idea of have people in the world that are famous. As something that keeps coming to my mind and me thinking, oh, what a cool idea I just had and haven't had before. Perhaps a tree race? It's the third time it brought it up. Okay. One of the things that I've thought of for a while is I want, of course, as I build the world, I will make various subclasses to help tie the game and the world together. I've often thought, where could I make a full class? I want to make a new class. I like working with and developing stuff for the game. It's fun for me. But there have been a number of times where I've come up with ideas for, let's make this new class, and as I start working on it, I'm like, nah, this works better and makes more sense as a subclass for this other class. Because the classes are pretty, do cover quite a bit. But I came up with an idea. I say maybe a Hulk / Mr. Hyde / Sia in Thundercloud's character option would need a unique class. Now let me explain that. Hulk, I'm sure many of you get Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk. He gets angry and he turns into the Hulk. Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He drinks whatever potion and he turns into this mindless beast. Sia in Thunderclouds. Sia is a singer. She is in the, mega group. I don't know. She is part of LSD. They did a song Thunderclouds. I watched the music video. That is part of what inspired this here idea. That music video, to me, I'm like, that eccentric group of people traveling together, that's a D&D party. If you haven't seen the... Anyways, basically, the kid that plays the role of Sia in the video is one person, and then they have... It's been a long time since I watched it, but something happens and they basically, their costume changes, and sort of seeming personality changes. It's just the idea of it doesn't have to just be weak guy becomes strong guy. It can be other power. Think of it maybe Magic Girl, like from anime. Point being, person changes into other person as another option that would need a unique class. So however I end up building it, I don't know. But the idea of changing is a big part of it. And that's not something that any of our existing classes really have. And have it be one that is set up like Warlock with multiple choices. As a Warlock, not only do you choose your archetype, you also choose your material, whether you have the book or the chain or the blade. So, you have multiple choice points throughout that class. But for this one, you can choose both what causes the transformation. I got angry. I drank a potion. What was it? Touched the lightning? Touched the cloud? Whatever. Forget what it was. What causes the transformation and what the transformation makes you become. Sort of building on sort of what your powers are there. So that would be an idea for making something as more of a unique class. Again, I haven't actually started building it all, but I wrote down that bit of note, and I might do it. And then I come up with a possible hell, abandonment, Sheol, an oubliette. I think oubliette would probably be the name I'd grab, but just that loneliness, abandoned feeling. I wonder how I was feeling when I came up with, ooh, yeah, that's definitely something to cover in the hells. Because, like, some of them are, oh, we're all suffering together. It's like, no. This is your own unique hell. You are here. There's no one else around. You are alone. Forever. Ouch. So, just one possible hell there. Then I have here, add a handful of new, smaller animals as familiar options. Make some new animals that aren't in the base book. Let's add some. I'd love some new familiars. Or, if need be, add an upgraded familiar spell for higher level options. Maybe more powerful familiars. I like companions. I have some players that like companions. It's fun. Let's make it cool. Add dire animals with spiky bone protrusions and ill temperament to increase the challenge rating of some animals, perhaps native to Second Continent, which is the one that is currently being colonized. Yeah, just the idea of, let's have bring dire animals back. Those were a 3rd edition thing I liked. Where'd they go? Bring them back. Then here, since dwarves are earth attuned, perhaps, if I have them, elves might be nature attuned. Maybe forest, jungle, woods, etc. Or river and stream. Maybe merfolk for water attuned, and if no elves, tree or plant folk can fill the nature role. I feel like I'm going to end up with some sort of tree folk with the way my notes are going here, because I keep bringing them up. But again, here, I'm bringing up the fact, I don't know if I'm going to have elves. If none of my players say, I want elves in this game, I probably won't. If I have any of my players that are like, yeah, I definitely want to make sure elves stay on the table as a possible race option, then I will. But, we'll see. Perhaps have a race with a divination focus and a read the stars ability. Or maybe that's better for a class. But something to make the astrology theme reach beyond the heroic catalyst. I mentioned earlier the idea of having, born under a certain astrological sign. Part of me is I want a reason to make the skies, the heavens, the stars, to lay out the constellations. That's cool. I want to do that. Let's give maybe another thing on top of it that you can do with it, whether it's, a class or a race that's sort of their culture, which to me, my brain says the centaurs in Harry Potter. Alternatively, if I make it a class, it could be like a subclass, a type of bard that reads, whatever it may be. But yeah, I can, basically something else that utilizes the astrology of the world. Maybe you have a race, such as goblins, with a civilized tinker version for the first continent, but a savage and tribal on the other continents. Maybe halflings, maybe half-orcs. But some race that basically, you have your sub-race options, hill dwarves, mountain dwarves, which I'm basically dropping mountain dwarves because I never liked them and I'm doing dwarves my own different way now. But essentially, you have those different options for races. Maybe have a race where, depending on what continent they're from, they have different civilization level. Like, they seem quite different, even if physically similar. Perhaps circles, so I'm talking about druid, circles of the sun, stars, and sea to flesh out druid choices. Assuming we keep druids, would include a second option to enhance wild shape differently. Perhaps druids are native to the third continent, so their magic is new and unknown for people discovering the area. I love that idea. What if druids are native to the third continent? The third continent, when I say that, is the one that is the open wilderness. It is unexplored. Modern civilization knows nothing of that power. That's all new. I like that. Maybe, for warlock patrons, the angelic host, the undead master, and one for each element type. So we already get, the fiend. So that's the hells. Angelic host, the heavens, undead master being the underworld, and then each element type being for each of the 4 elemental planes. So that was just a theory, and that's, I'm sure, where that came from. Oh, here. This is important. Annoying for some players, but I like it from a world-building standpoint. And so, of course, I'll have to come up with things how to both make it worthwhile, make it useful, and also not drive people crazy. No common language. I don't like it. I don't like common language. It makes things easy, but if I'm going to put extra effort into developing a world, I don't want it. Also, no racial language. All dwarves speak dwarf. No. Well, where did that dwarf come from? Because it's different. Most people on Continent 1 speak a language from one of the larger cities, so there's only a few different languages perhaps on the first continent, with some having a second primary language in addition to it. Second continent has that main language, people that have traveled there near the part where the civilization process originated, so near that port and spreading out from there. Most of the towns and villages have 1 or 2 people that speak it, so even if you get to the other side of the continent, you're going to have some influence of it, and you're going to be able to find someone that can translate. Very rare on third continent, many language barriers there. So when you go to the unexplored world, you don't know how to talk to people from societies that have never interacted with societies that you've interacted with. Or perhaps a few main languages on the primary continent for the different nations, and include help with how to use the language barrier, such as having them overhear a language they know will get them to meet a needed NPC. If their characters are in a new city and no one speaks their language, and you tell them, you hear someone say in your own language, something trivial, as they're talking to someone walking down the street. Your players who currently can't communicate with anyone we follow that person. We want to talk to them, because that is their ability to communicate. So that can get them to meet an NPC you need them to meet. Just have them speak the right language. And how to overcome barriers when trying to do simple things like shopping and such. Basically, just have a paragraph that you can read out of, yes, you mimic things out and you manage to get it. If your character doesn't speak the same language as the shopkeep, don't turn that into a pain, unless you want that to be a funny and cool roleplay thing. Once, sure. Don't keep bringing it up every time the player needs to go buy more arrows for their bow. They can get the point across, I need arrows, I have money. We make an exchange. That is absolutely something that people are willing to do. Do to more common magic, perhaps laws to regulate it. Must have a license to have a gun or blasting wand, or a license to fly, military license to mess with the dead, like necromancy. Somewhat a way to regulate what folks can do, somewhat to produce income for the state, and make jobs for the agents and training instructors. Being this. My players often get brooms of flying, and it's annoying. So I want to be able to regulate it. But yeah, just sort of breaking it down into why is the world doing this? Well, yes, they want to, make sure that they keep track of who does what. But also they want money for the state. They want to create government jobs. Yeah, let's be honest about it, right? Of course, there is private education. From advanced schools that nobles send children to arcane academies. That is obviously part of the world. But maybe there is a level of public education, at least in some cities, 1 or 2 years, paid for by landowner taxes. So only children of landowners or homeowners apply? No. Renting a home should count, being taxed for the benefit. So figure out the term that counts them. Basically, I want to organize this where I'd say landowners, but I mean people that rent land as well. The point is it should make it hard for the homeless, the real poor, to advance because they don't get access to the schools. But it is part of a government program, so everyone that pays taxes in the city does get access to. So trying to create that divide that keeps the poor down. Again, terrible things in society, yes, but they make for interesting stories. And as I'm building a fictional world, I'm okay with just making it interesting. It doesn't have to be good-hearted or anything. It can just be interesting because no one actually has to really live there. Have notes on the city battery, going back to the power source from before, that if it's nearly full, maybe the top 10%, they pay much less, maybe 10% of the normal amount. Also, when nearly empty, much more if they can afford, as in, if it's empty due to we're in the middle of wartime, they're probably not paying you any extra to put spell slots into it because they can't afford it. But if they use too much power for a festival, and they're almost out, they're going to spend 10 times as much to get that up to a decent level, where they're not afraid that the city is going to shut down because it would run out of power. And things like the lightning rails would all run off of these city batteries and such. And now we realize how far in to this document we are. My 1.5 years working on this, and this is one of the key concepts that I think of, like the two main things I think of when I think of the world. This is the second one. And when I started scrolling through my notes, I was baffled at how recent I came up with this. The first continent, civilized continent, is in the midst of war. Comparable to sometime within the first year of World War II. First year or two, I don't really know. I'm watching through the World War II YouTube channel, like the 1 week at a time kind of thing. It's very interesting, very inspiring, and that's where this idea came from. But the idea is have that continent in the middle of a war. Have it during one of the slower periods. So have some big blitz battles that have already happened and some things that are coming up. But make it where if you don't want the war to be active, taking control of the campaign, it can be something that basically is just in the background if you'd like. But have it during a slower period where there has been terrible things done, that soldiers must be ready for battle, but with a period of just information gathering and building forces. So you can just have some of that more light stuff, perhaps. Perhaps the aggressor is a nation against mages, using anti-magic field bombs, having fields blocking planar transportation within their nation. They can use great beasts and drum up tribal warriors to aid in their battle, with the defending nation being the one described previous, with the arcane batteries and such. Other nations around, some having been taken over, others trying to remain neutral, and perhaps others with their own wars going on. Inner war conflict, which means, yeah, you can have that background, bit of tension, or you can run a game where the players are playing soldiers in a war, and they're having to make those decisions, and they're having to enact that, and be special task forces or whatever. Like, make it where that is an option. And that is a huge part of what I want this world to have, is that world war, which is really just the first continent war, because the other places have their own stuff going on. But yeah, that's definitely a part of my mindset for what I want out of this. And I mentioned before I like writing prose for my worlds. See how I get all italicized here? It's because I did. This is just a story that came to my mind. Up on the ridge of the city's upper district sits the Copper Tower. From a distance, nothing unusual, but it's around this tower that the city formed. Said to have been the home of the great magi, Sel Valoramin, the tower has no doors and no windows, and the spire atop it resists tarnish. It has been nearly 2 decades since anyone has entered or exited that building. Not true, cried Arandi. Malvik went in it just last harvest. The loss of Malvik, mind and body, is a sad tale, but the tower's involvement is just an ill rumor. No, I remember it. I even heard him before classes. He said there was a door in the tower only he could see. Now, Arondi, don't disparage the failing mind of a youth being lost. I'm not. We warned him to stay clear of it, Celery and I. No good from a wizard's tower. But he was simply entranced. He must have gone in it. But there's no door. He said he saw one. He really did. And in truth, there was a door. For Malvik, at least, and for others. Some who snuck in under the cover of darkness, some who ignored it and never spoke a word, and some who would never see the tower through their whole lives. But there was some truth in the elder's statement. It has nearly been 2 decades since anyone has left that building. Within the simple tower is a complex labyrinth, the home and workshop of the Great Magi, as well as all the chambers he created to contain his work. Is Sel Valoramin still within the tower as well? And if so, is it he who chooses who is permitted to enter his home? Or is it fate who decides who may intrude on the home of one of history's greatest mages? This is inspired by Critical Role's Happy Fun Ball. I was like, that's cool. Let's do an extra-dimensional space dungeon that is based on a mage. I made it a tower rather than a portable ball, just thinking some ideas. I think this was decided the first time it came up in their campaign, so I think it will end up being a bit different overall, now that we've seen more exploration into what that entails. But in general, that's sort of the option for really a near limitless dungeon. If I do use this prose as the background for one of the cities, consider Sel Valoramin as a name amended to some spells, as in add his name to some titles. Sel Valoramin's Magnificent Mansion, for example. And the heavens may include places more fantasy set. So some of my earlier examples were based on biblical things. They could be wholly imagined, such as the Forest of Fae, or the Sapphire Halls. That's literally all I wrote about it. I came up with a cool title, Visualization of Caverns of Sapphire or something maybe. I don't know, but that's the Sapphire Halls. I have a name. That's all I need right now. It's inspiration for later. Maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't. The nation which has outlawed magic, so in that conflict, that war, that nation that's outlawed it, is a great place to have mystery plots and things that magic could solve in no time. But because magic can't be used, the challenge is present. Thinking the anti-magic effect is produced by an otherwise harmless gas sourced from some beholder relative. Perhaps it prevents magic while in it and also has a duration once out of it before it wears off. You can't use your magic. Magic is not an option here. I have a section of the world where magic doesn't work. You can't figure out who the killer was by just walking up to the corpse and saying, "Hey, who killed you?" And then they say, It was Bob. Bob killed me. It's Bob's fault. All right, let's go arrest Bob." And you walk off and you arrest Bob. That is not an exciting mystery. No magic there. Oh, and with the deities, I told you I had some more ideas for deities coming out. The deities, a tale of unobtainable love between the god of death and of time, as the sands of time must be watched over, the only interaction being when someone's hourglass runs out and their soul is handed over to death, but they long to reach the point where the last person's soul is retired and they may be together at last. In a visual perspective, masses of small hourglasses in the outer realms are the embodiment of people's souls, with sand running out, and when the sand has all passed through, the soul is picked up and handed by time to death to be cared for beyond that point. Taken to whatever, the Underworld or wherever. But just sort of that visualization. In a gameplay perspective, someone could literally visit the halls of time where souls are physically kept for everyone on the planet. And what chaos would ensue, who knows? Again, I say, perhaps tree folk? I came up with an interesting new idea. Or the like, are raised or awakened with souls of those departed. A method of continuing life or reusing it, maybe with, maybe without the memories of the past. Now I have the idea of, do you keep the memories or not? But I've already had that idea. I've kept having that idea and not remembering that I've had it before, so it gets typed up again and again. I guess I like that idea. But not enough to remember that I've had it in the past. Perhaps have a culture whose surname, again going back to surnames, I mentioned that earlier, it helps define a culture, whose surname is based on the eldest living member of the family, so their name would change over time. A static identity is less important to that society than the family identity, and respecting their elders. Also, if a member of the family leaves for too long, they lose connection with the family, but also with their own identity. They can't be positive what their surname is at a certain point. They've been away from home for too long. They haven't heard from anyone. They literally don't know what their last name is anymore. I mean, because the society ties them that close with the remaining living members of their family. I don't know, it's another weird way to think about it, but it helps, when you think about things like that, what is the society that would do that, and that helps identify it. So that's intriguing to me. And as it is wartime, perhaps one or more nations use media to vilify their opposition. Propaganda. We're in the middle of war. What's the propaganda look like? How are people trying to get their citizens to support the war by showing how evil those magic users really are? Of course we're against them. We're against them because we're trying to save the whole world, or it's going to destroy us and everyone else because magic is so evil. Right? I mean, it's what happens. It's war. And that is the bottom of that document. So yeah, that's just the notes I have for the first year and a half of not working on building the world. Not really having talked to my players about what they want from it, but those are just the ideas that I've had. Some of which written on scrap bits of paper. Some of which get written on the back of my hand until I get home and type it up. Just things as I go about my day that I come up with ideas. And it's been a while. I mean, the last couple aren't too old, but I mean, there have been points where I've gone months without working on it at all. Or there have been months where I work on it almost every day. A new idea comes from me, and I have to, when I get home, I have to type it out. It's, I mean, you can purpose to think about it more and come up with ideas. But it's not the kind of thing that I generally just sit down and I think about it while I'm working on it and not when I'm away. If I start thinking about it while I'm working on it, ideas will come to me elsewhere. And that is what I've done in like the first year and a half of actually building this world. I don't have a name for the world. I don't really have an identity for the world. I'm missing all of that still. I mean, my goal was to talk to my players first. Whew. Oh well. But some of my players know much of the notes from that. Others don't. I'm not really... for the ones that don't, I'm not going to tell them. I'm perfectly fine for them to get their own perspective and ideas. And how much of their ideas I use, I don't know. But I will see what they have to say. And again, I hope over time, as I build this world and I invite you along the process, whatever that may be, that it will help both inspire you to build a world of your own and come up with some cool ideas, and also perhaps if you're having trouble figuring out how do you do that, other people that just happens for them. It's like, no, it's just kind of over time. It's just kind of, it's not like I sit down and just, oh, here I got a world now. This is a year and a half. And I'm just at the beginning. A year and a half and I have nothing concrete. Except probably that there's going to be treants. Because I keep bringing that up. There's going to be some sort of heroic catalyst. Because I really like that idea. And that there's going to be a continent at war. I think those are the three... Well, really the second two are the two. I guess if all my players say, we want no plant people, I'll probably give up my treant idea. But the other two, I'm pretty much going to stick with. Those are probably the things that I know about the world so far. And then I got a bunch of other ideas. I also really like my Dwarves idea, so I'm hopeful for that one. In the end, it's my decision, so it'll probably happen. But yeah, I hope it's going to be rambly. The whole series is probably going to be rambly. Because it isn't a concise here. Let's come up with some world building ideas. Start putting things together. There's my notes so far. I read them. You could read them. And I'm interested to see where the world goes, and eventually when I start running a game in it, how that game progresses. Or games. Thank you for watching. Join us, subscribe. If you have comments on both my world building process, ideas for world building, if I inspired you, if you comment, like YouTube stuff, thank you for watching at the very least.